It is January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs stands on a stage in San Francisco, wearing his signature black turtleneck, and pulls a sleek rectangular slab of glass from his pocket. The crowd erupts. It is the iPhone. But nearly 3,000 miles away, in a snowy boardroom in Waterloo, Ontario, the executives at Research in Motion, the creators of the BlackBerry, are watching this same presentation. They are not intimidated. They are not scrambling to redesign their products. They are laughing. To them, this device is a joke. It has no physical keyboard. It relies on a fragile glass screen. It promises full internet browsing, which they know will absolutely crush mobile networks. And worst of all, its battery will barely last a single day. The BlackBerry brass dismisses the iPhone as a consumer toy, a shiny bauble that no serious business professional would ever bring into a boardroom. At that exact moment, BlackBerry controls nearly half of the entire smartphone market. Presidents, prime ministers, and Fortune 500 CEOs are hopelessly addicted to their devices, earning them the famous nickname, CrackBerry. They are the undisputed kings of the mobile world. But that laughter echoing in the Waterloo boardroom is the sound of an empire dying. This is the story of the greatest miscalculation in modern business history. A fatal case of corporate hubris, where the kings of the mountain looked down at the future, scoffed at it, and lost absolutely everything. To understand the magnitude of their arrogance, you have to understand how utterly dominant BlackBerry was. Before them, phones were just for making calls. Research in Motion changed the world by putting secure, instant email into the pockets of the global elite. Co-CEOs Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie were formidable. Lazaridis was the brilliant engineer obsessed with network efficiency. Balsillie was the ruthless businessman who bent cellular carriers to his will. Together, they forged a device running on practically no data, holding battery life for days, featuring the iconic QWERTY keyboard users could type on without looking. If you wanted to be taken seriously in business, you needed a BlackBerry. It was a status symbol and an essential tool. The company's valuation skyrocketed into the tens of billions. They felt invincible, protected by a massive moat of corporate IT departments trusting their legendary security. When Apple entered the arena, Lazaridis looked at the iPhone strictly through the lens of an engineer. He saw a flawed machine. The iPhone downloaded full web pages, whereas BlackBerry compressed data to spare fragile cellular networks. Lazaridis predicted the iPhone would instantly crash the AT&T network, and initially, he was right. Early iPhones dropped calls constantly, but he failed to see what Jobs understood perfectly. Consumers did not care about dropped calls if it meant holding the entire internet in their hand. Consumers wanted a beautiful screen, music, video, and a magical interface. BlackBerry believed typing an email securely was the pinnacle of mobile technology. Apple believed the phone was a personal computer. It was a clash of philosophies, and BlackBerry firmly believed the consumer market would never eclipse enterprise. For a couple of years after the iPhone launched, BlackBerry's sales actually continued climbing. This was incredibly dangerous, because it validated their ignorance. They looked at rising profits and told themselves the iPhone was a niche fad. But beneath the surface, the ground shifted rapidly. Executives forced to use BlackBerries for work started buying iPhones for their personal lives. Soon, they refused to carry two devices. They demanded their IT departments let them use iPhones for work email. The impenetrable moat was drying up. Panic finally set in at Waterloo when Verizon, desperate to compete with AT&T's exclusive hold on the iPhone, demanded BlackBerry build them a touchscreen killer. This resulted in the BlackBerry Storm, arguably the device that sealed the company's fate. Released in 2008, the Storm was an absolute, unmitigated disaster. Because Lazaridis was so obsessively attached to the physical sensation of typing, he insisted the Storm's entire glass screen click downward when pressed, simulating a physical button. It was incredibly difficult to manufacture, horribly clunky to use, and notoriously buggy. The software was rushed, the devices froze, and almost every single one of the initial million units sold had to be returned or replaced. Verizon was furious. The storm proved to the world, and more importantly to developers, that BlackBerry did not understand this new era of smartphones. They were trying to force a physical paradigm onto a digital canvas. While BlackBerry stumbled over touchscreens, Apple launched the App Store. This was the killing blow, transforming the iPhone from a cool gadget into an indispensable platform. Developers flocked to iOS, creating a booming digital economy. Then Google entered the fray with Android, giving every other manufacturer the blueprint to build an iPhone competitor. The market exploded with high-quality, app-driven touchscreen phones. BlackBerry, stubbornly clinging to its proprietary, outdated operating system, found itself completely isolated. By the time they realized apps were the new foundation of the mobile economy, it was far too late. Their own ecosystem was a barren wasteland. Why would a developer spend months building an app for a dying platform when they could reach hundreds of millions of users on iOS and Android? Internally, the culture at Research in Motion devolved into chaos. Balsillie and Lazaridis found themselves increasingly at odds. Balsillie wanted to pivot towards software, offering BlackBerry Messenger to other platforms before WhatsApp could steal the crown. Lazaridis, the hardware purist, refused to abandon physical devices. This paralysis meant they did neither effectively. They announced a new operating system, BlackBerry 10, but it was delayed year after year. The market moved at light speed, leaving BlackBerry stuck in the mud. When BlackBerry 10 finally did launch, nobody cared. The world had moved on. The people who once swore they could never live without a physical keyboard had seamlessly adapted to typing on glass. The executives who used to laugh at the iPhone's battery life were now perfectly happy plugging their phones in every night, because in exchange, they got a supercomputer in their pocket. In just half a decade, BlackBerry went from holding nearly half the smartphone market to virtually zero. It was a collapse of breathtaking speed and magnitude. They did not lose because they lacked money or engineering talent. They lost because of profound, blinding arrogance. They had defined the smartphone, and arrogantly assumed they held the permanent right to define what it always would be. They laughed at the disruptor, assuming their walled garden of secure email and physical keyboards was an eternal fortress. The story of BlackBerry is the ultimate cautionary tale for any dominant company. It proves that past success is not a guarantee of future survival. The moment you stop listening to the consumer, decide your way is the only right way, and laugh at the future instead of trying to understand it, you have already lost. The empire was not taken from them. They handed the keys over the moment they refused to evolve.